Let's talk about America, guns, and the law. There are more guns than people in the US, nearly 400 million of them, and those are just the ones accounted for. And so far this year, more than 20,000 people have died because of a gun. That's roughly 100 people killed in the country every single day.
Yet again in America, innocent families are slumped to their knees in grief.
Another weekend of gun violence.
This deadly shooting at a Boulder, Colorado grocery store.
Mass shootings grab the headlines, but gun violence goes way beyond that. Homicides, police shootings, domestic violence, accidents, and suicides, which make up the highest number of gun-related deaths.
Gun violence has taken more lives than any other public health crisis of our time.
We lose roughly 40,000 lives every year to gun violence in this country, and that leaves behind 40,000 families, friendship circles, communities.
Gun violence in this country is an epidemic, and it's an international embarrassment.
The president wants to do something about it, but there's resistance.
They'd rather get tough on the law-abiding than go out and get tough on criminals.
So how do US gun laws actually work? Why are some Americans against tougher gun control? And what does President Biden want to do about it? Most Americans agree on one thing. Gun violence is a problem. According to one survey, it's a pretty huge majority, with only 6% who say it's not a problem at all. The question of how to tackle gun violence is where there's debate. And at the heart of that debate is gun control and whether more laws are needed. But before we get into that, let's debunk the myth that gun control is anything new.
Hundreds of years ago, there were rules about owning ammunition. You had to register to own gunpowder. You had to register your guns. You couldn't carry your guns with you in town.
Now you boys hand your guns over.
We had in the late 1700s, in the populated cities like Boston and New York, Philadelphia for that matter, gun regulations which today would be unimaginable.
In the 1930s, they banned machine guns in response to gangs. In the late 60s, after the assassination of President JFK, the Gun Control Act came in. It imposed regulations on the firearms industry and came up with a list of people who could be denied the sale of guns. And in the 90s, President Clinton's crime bill introduced a federal ban on assault weapons, but that expired 10 years later.
We've always respected in the United States both gun rights and gun regulations.
And that goes back to the Constitution. For Americans, being able to own a gun is a basic right, up there with free speech. The Second Amendment says, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So what does that mean? Well, for a couple of hundred years, the understanding focused on that mention of a militia. It's really the idea that the states would serve as a check against a possible tyrannical government. Makes sense, seeing as it was written after the War of Independence. And that idea still persists today. But in 2008, there was a landmark Supreme Court decision that focused on the second half. It's known as the Heller case. The court ruled that a ban on handguns in the District of Columbia was unconstitutional, and for the first time affirmed the right for individuals to keep arms for self-defense in the home.
That was an enormous change in the sort of legal meaning of the Constitution. Now, most Americans already believed this, so what the Supreme Court held was already the popular view.
And that shift in thinking among Americans started happening well before 2008.
40, 50 years ago, we see that people predominantly owned guns for hunting or for sport. And now we're seeing a big shift towards the primary reason people are owning firearms is related to self-defense. A lot of it has to do with marketing around gun ownership. So in the decline of hunting, the gun lobby recognized that they needed new ways to motivate people to own firearms.
The National Rifle Association, the US's main gun rights advocacy group, has also played a big part in that, in pushing the idea that guns are needed for self-defense.
The only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun.
From my cold, dead hands,
They've really changed the everyday politics of guns, and how people relate to guns is part of your identity. It's part of what makes you who you are. You are the kind of person who takes your rights seriously. You're going to exercise them. You are not going to rely on someone else to solve your problems. The gun symbolizes that.
We can't get away from the fact that this is all super political, and we see that when it comes to support for gun laws. Overall, more than half of Americans favor stricter laws, but when you break that down, more than 80% of Democrats support more gun control compared to just 20% of Republicans.
Republicans have placed more importance on gun rights, whereas Democrats place more importance on gun regulation. That partisan gap 30 years ago was probably 20 points, which is big, right? Now it's almost 50 points, which is a greater gap, partisan gap, than you see on almost any other issue in American political life.
So what do US gun laws look like? Well, that depends on where you live. There are federal laws that apply across the whole country that, for instance, ban convicted felons, people with mental illness, or kids under 18 from buying guns. But then there are state laws, and each state has a lot of leeway to enforce their own regulations, and they differ pretty wildly.
In states that are controlled by Democrats and states that are controlled by Republicans, the difference you see in regulation, I think, reflects the sort of underlying partisan divide.
In Massachusetts, a strongly Democratic state, you need a police permit and a background check to buy a gun, while Republican-controlled Texas recently passed a law allowing people to carry concealed handguns without any permit.
Now we're at the point where 20 states, you don't have any obligation to get a permit, which means you don't have to have a background check, you don't need any additional training.
So now we've got a Democrat in the White House, and President Biden has declared gun violence a public health epidemic. His plans to tackle it include more money for community programs to address some of the root causes of gun violence.
Whether that's housing, whether that's education, whether that's employment services, how do we channel all of these programs to help reduce this crisis that frankly is now the #1 cause of death for all youth in America and the #1 cause of death for Black men in America?
On the legal side, Biden wants to toughen up gun laws and make sure the ones that already exist are actually applied, including zero tolerance for rogue gun dealers.
If you willfully sell a gun to someone who's prohibited from possessing it, if you willfully fail to run a background check, if you willfully falsify a record, if you willfully fail to cooperate with the tracing requests or inspections, my message to you is this: we'll find you.
He also wants to tighten the rules on what are called ghost guns. These are weapons sold in parts and without a serial number, so they can't be traced.
Right now, in the US, you could go on the internet and you can buy a kit that you can get shipped to your house without a background check. And with YouTube video instructions and a little bit of know-how, you can create a fully functional firearm.
Another big thing Biden wants to do is bring back the ban on assault weapons, guns like the semi-automatic AR-15 rifle. According to a Newsweek investigation, this type of gun was used in more than a quarter of the last 80 mass shootings, like this year's attack in a supermarket in Boulder, Colorado, the Orlando nightclub shooting in 2016, and at Sandy Hook Elementary School, where 20 children and 6 teachers were killed in 2012. But can he do it? As Democrats push for more gun control, there are plenty of voters and politicians in Congress who say guns just aren't the problem.
They're talking about, oh, we need to stop the AR-15, we need to stop the AR-15. You know, more people are stabbed to death than they're shot with the AR-15. So it's just, it's absurd hype, and it's mostly just nonsense.
Let's target the bad guys, the felons, the fugitives, those with mental disease. Let's put them in jail. Let's stop them from getting guns. Let's not scapegoat innocent law-abiding citizens, and let's not target their constitutional rights.
Now, even though we always hear about how America is so divided over guns, there's another way to look at it.
I think maybe the central misunderstanding, including within the United States about the gun debate, is the idea that gun rights and gun regulation are mutually exclusive. And that's just not true.
There is a very broad, moderate middle, including a lot of gun owners.
There's a great deal of consensus with regard, for example, to background checks.
So right now, this is more of a political battle than it is a public opinion battle.
Guns aren't going away. That's a non-starter in the US. But if Americans can find that common ground to look at policies they can agree on, maybe that's where there's a chance of saving lives. If there's a news story or a topic you want to get your head around, get in touch with us on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. And also make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can't miss our next episode.